shall we get started, Deb, and then people can roll in and, join us as they wish. All right. Kia ora, everyone. My name's Liam. I'm here in the capacity of implementation partner for this pilot project. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today and taking some time out of their evening to be with us, and also a big thank you to our speakers tonight, who you'll hear from as we move throughout the schedule. And we've got some exciting things to cover off tonight. Sorry. So I will just quickly hand over to Tamara, one of our panel members, to start with a karakia to open our evening up. Thanks, Tamara.
Tēnā koutou katoa, e tatua, kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa paunāmu te mawana, he hūrahi mā tātou e te rangi nei, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou ia, tātou katoa, ui e taiki e. May peace be widespread, may the seas be like greenstone, a pathway for us all this day. Let us show respect for each other, for one another binds us all together. Kia ora, ko Tamara Takingawa. I am here on behalf of representing Māori, and that's what I would like to. I'm on the panel of this climate adaptation group, and something that I would really like to see as an outcome on this panel is Māori and disability representation and collaboration, creating inclusive environments, and so we can all collectively enjoy climate adaptation and be able to be involved in it. That's an outcome that I would like to see personally, but that was me, and thank you for everyone for being here, and I'll pass it along.
Kia ora. Thanks, Tamara. Liam speaking. Deb, I'll hand it over to you to do a bit of an introduction and set the scene for tonight, please.
Lovely. Thank you, and thank you for the lovely karakia, Tamara. So this is an introduction to climate adaptation, disability, and the disability-led climate adaptation pilot, which is a little bit of a mouthful. And thank you all for joining us this evening. Next slide, please, Emily. So I'll just introduce myself as well. Ko Debbie Edwards Takuingwa. I'm the project lead for this pilot, working for Auckland Council. And we wanted to bring people from the disability community together tonight firstly to help strengthen the awareness and understanding of climate adaptation and disability and how they overlap. And also we really want to encourage people from the community to participate in the pilot. There will be a number of opportunities to do this through co-designing the process and then prioritising and developing and delivering on the grant proposals. So we've got $150,000 altogether for grants, and that's $100,000 from Auckland Council and $50,000 from Foundation North. So that's why we're here tonight. And so this is really, we've got 5 speakers lined up for you, and we don't have a lot of time this evening, so it's really just a little bit of a taster, a bit of an introduction to the climate adaptation and disability themes. I'll just quickly run through who you'll hear from. We've got Anya Kelly Costello, who's our subject matter expert, who'll provide a little bit of an overview at the start. Then we've got Ben and Nadia from Auckland Council to talk about the wider Resilient Tamaki Makaurau work program, and also how this pilot came about. We've got Greg, also from Auckland Council, from the Emergency Management Office, who will obviously talk about that. And then we've got Jana and Connie from Foundation North, who are going to talk about the participatory grant making approach. So we'll have those speakers, and then we will have some question time, and there'll be a pause for people to formulate and submit your questions using Q&A, the Q&A function, and then there'll be an opportunity for presenters to respond to the questions. So we're asking you to, or encouraging you to post your questions into the Q&A while people are speaking, but there'll also be a few minutes at the end of all the presentations for people to do that. We'd also like to encourage you to use the reactions during the webinar, whether that's a little heart or a thumbs up or clapping, whatever it might be. And just to note that as hosts and presenters, we have our cameras and mics on, but if you're just participating, oh lovely, someone's already clapping, that's great, thank you. But the cameras and mics are off for everyone attending apart from the presenters, so please use those functions. We probably won't be checking the chat, so if you do have any technical issues or other questions, pop those in the Q&A as well. And next slide, please, Emily. Got people still joining us, so they'll be able to catch up. So just a little bit about the disability-led climate adaptation pilot and who's involved. The purpose, and you'll hear a bit more about this from Nadia, but the purpose of the pilot is to really accelerate disability-led climate adaptation planning and action through the grants that we have, and also through the process that we're using. So along the way, we have some other important objectives as well. We want to really increase the capability and capacity of the disability community in the climate adaptation space. We want to build trusting and sustainable relationships between council and the community. And we also want to test the participatory grant making approach. And our learning from the pilot will help to shape the wider Resilient Tamaki Makaurau work program. So we've set up a three-way partnership. There's Auckland Council, obviously, and so I'm the project lead from there, and also just want to acknowledge Emily, who's part of our team and helping with all the logistics tonight. We also have the second partner, and there's actually two of them, are implementation partners. We have one for engagement, leading engagement, and that's Liam, he's tonight's chair. And then we've also got Sissy Rock from Community Think, who's our facilitator. And she's travelling tonight, so unable to join us. And the third partner is actually the grant advisory panel that Tamara is part of, and also Paul Brown. And so at this point, I'm just going to hand over to Paul, so he can say a little bit about the role of the panel in the pilot. Thanks, Paul.
Kia ora, ko Paul Brown aho. I'm Paul Brown, and really pleased to speak on behalf of the Grant Advisory Panel. I think I was asked to speak because none of the rest of the panel believed that I could do it in 2 minutes, which is my allotted time, but I'm going to give it a go. So who are the panel? And there should be a slide here, but you've already heard from Tamara Grant. We have Pip Patston, Les Marsh, Tracy Gaynor, Jade Farah, myself, and I feel I'm missing one. Have I made a faux pas and forgotten someone? Monica, of course, and that's why, because Monica's not here tonight, which is why I've forgotten. How could I forget Monica Leach? Sorry, Monica, if you get a hold of this recording or transcript. Anyway, we are the panel. So what's that about? Well, I guess if this project's disability led, then we are a panel of disabled people who are advising council and the implementation partners around this project. So what are we doing? Well, we're getting ourselves up to speed and thinking about the intersection between disability and climate adaptation, climate change, climate justice. We're also advising on accessible and inclusive ways of working a project like this. We will also be doing a bit of work about what a participatory grants scheme, if you want to call it that, might look like and how it might work and be accessible and inclusive. And of course, one of our big jobs will be to assess grants that come in and advise council which grants should be funded. And that's the bit I think I'm really looking forward to getting into, that, to see what disabled community comes up with, what innovative and exciting and new ideas that we as creative disabled people can put together in this area. And I think that, you know, we're seeing this is fairly broad. It's not just about emergency management. I like the phrase about thriving, you know, between times of climate issues, and I'd like hopefully to see some grants around that. So that's the panel and our job. It's pretty cool and exciting, and we're really looking forward to seeing, as I say, all your creative ideas as disabled people and disability organisations about how we kind of take our place and take a leadership role in that intersection between disability and climate adaptation. So thanks, and yeah, look forward to seeing your bids and being involved in the future hui with the community. Cheers. Ka kite.
Liam speaking. Thanks, Paul. Okay, so now we have Anya to come in and speak with us and share her knowledge around the key concepts of climate adaptation and considerations for the disability community. So Anya, over to you.
Kia ora koutou. Thanks, Liam. Yep, ko Anya tōku ingoa. So I am a disabled person who has been interested for a long time in climate justice and the intersections of, like, how is that relevant to us? So that's going to be my presentation for the next few minutes. Is just setting a bit of context. So at the moment, like on a day-to-day basis, we know that things are already pretty kind of hard for a lot of our community, right? Like hard to have enough money to live on, hard to find a home that's going to meet our needs. It's hard to get around accessibly a lot of the time, hard to get the healthcare we need when we need it. It can be also quite hard to get outdoors into the taiao, into kind of nature in the ways that we might want to be able to do that on an equal basis with everybody else. So we try to do with the best of what we have, but it's not easy. So why am I starting there? Well, because climate change is gonna exacerbate these challenges unless we are proactive as we can about adapting to it. So for me, that's what climate is doing, is it's making the sort of general precarious nature of disabled people's lives that we've sort of tried to stitch together as best as we can, that bit trickier until and unless we get, you know, decision makers such as Auckland Council at the moment with a cool opportunity, but like lots of decision makers on board with making sure we're really involved. Yeah, basically climate change comes about when you have the fossil fuel industry, so coal, oil and gas companies, really basically focused on polluting the atmosphere because they want to keep making a profit over those forms of energy. So that's kind of been throwing our natural systems out of balance, and that's kind of this long-term global challenge that we're up against that is causing more extreme weather. So things like floods and extreme heat, extreme cold, droughts, wildfires, superstorms like cyclones. So one of the responsibilities is also that, you know, all of us, particularly in countries like Aotearoa that are comparatively richer countries, need to do our bit to not pollute as much. So that's one kind of tranche of, you know, area where we need things to be, to take disabled people along with those measures. So for example, if you're going to have like lower emissions transport systems, they also need to be accessible. This area is called mitigation usually, and everything kind of overlaps. So I wanted to mention it. It's not the main focus of this pilot, but it is something that's happening. So I just want you to be aware of that. So one of the kind of the main thing that this pilot is about is like, how can we design Auckland better and do things that are going to make it easier to live in a world that has some degree of climate change in it, because we can't completely wipe out climate change. We might like to be able to do that, but we can't do that. So if we are, for example, thinking in the longer term, the medium and longer term, and not just like the day before, about how could we get better prepared for floods, and also things like extreme heat as well, that's going to be a big one, then we're adapting, right? Where we're thinking, okay, and how can we design our buildings better and our environments better over a longer time. So not just the immediate preparedness for emergencies at our household level, but at a community level and at a city level as well. So basically, we want to move from a space of where people are often left behind, where disabled people are often not thought about by decision makers, which if you're a disabled person, you already know that. I don't need to tell you that. And also where it's not just disabled people who are often not thought about, right? Like often our systems are they work best for Pākehā. And I'm Pākehā, so they work best for people who are roughly from my cultural background. So there's biases that we need to correct. So I think the cool thing about this pilot project is that Auckland Council does really want to listen. There's actually money attached to this commitment. And as I mentioned, there's like the partnership approach to be working in with disabled people as well. So I just wanted to encourage that as disabled people, we don't need to have like the perfect answers. Like we don't need to have it all worked out. And honestly, like I've been thinking about climate change and disability for quite a few years, and like I definitely don't have the perfect answers. So we just kind of need to know that who we are and our own experiences is enough, and come with a willingness to kind of think through some ideas, be creative. So just a few sort of rough examples of things we could do, and this is not at all an exhaustive list. But for example, we could make it easier for disabled people to find out about the risks from flooding or storms or things like that where we live, because often the information for the planning isn't very accessible for us at the moment. We could make it more accessible for disabled people to be part of community gardens or environmental restoration projects, for example. We could do something arty or creative about what climate breakdown means for us, and our dreams also for what things need to change, our vision for what could be different. We could work with hapu and iwi, so whānau haua are closely involved in those taiao and climate-related kaupapa that hapu and iwi might be leading out on. So there are just a few examples, and yeah, I think it's Nadia next, but I will hand back to Liam. Yeah, thank you for listening.
Thanks, Sonia. It's actually Ben next, just to give an overview of the Resilient Tamaki Makaurau work program. So over to you, Ben. Thank you.
Kia ora, ko Ben Brooks tōku ingoa. So I'm a Senior Policy Manager at Auckland Council, and I'm responsible for the overall program called Resilient Tamaki Makaurau. And this disability pilot is a part of that. So I'll try to give you a brief overview. It's a bit of a sort of a sprawling program that we could talk about probably all night, but I'm not going to do that. So but if you do have questions about any bit of it, feel free to put them in the Q&A. Emily, do you want to go to the next one? So the program is basically about how we can support Aucklanders to get ready for climate disruption. As Anya mentioned, that takes lots of different forms. So in Auckland and most of the country, people are very familiar now with some of the severe floods that we've seen. We had those in Auckland a couple of years ago. We're getting coastal erosion, we're getting landslides. But as Anya said, we're also expecting more extreme heat, more fires, more drought. And so this program is looking at all of those climate-related natural hazards. It's not looking at things like earthquakes that aren't related to climate change, but it is looking at the full range of climate-related natural hazards. We know that those hazards, given their diversity and given the range that they have in terms of where they hit and the impact and the sort of the scale of them, will have a wide range of impacts. And if we look at the city that we live in, it wasn't designed to deal with these types of things. We saw that in the Auckland anniversary flood, but we'll also see that increasingly with other types of events as well. Auckland's doing relatively well, where we had a period without rain, but other parts of the country have been struggling, and a severe drought will definitely hit us. And again, we've already started to see some of the impacts of extreme heat. We also know that different people will be affected in different ways, and some people will be affected more than others. Lots of the discussions that we end up having often are about geographic communities. So we know that people in different parts of Auckland are more exposed, but we also know that communities of identity, such as this community, will also be affected regardless of where they live. And Anya did a great job of talking about some of the ways that play out in the different ways that people might be affected. But we also know it's not all doom and gloom. There is some things that we can do. There are ways that we can try to reduce that impact, and ways that we can try to make it easier and faster to recover when those events do arrive. So part of what we're trying to do is make sure that all Aucklanders are supported to start doing that planning now, so that when these events arrive, those impacts are less than they might be if we hadn't done this work, and the recovery is faster and easier than it would have been otherwise. Next slide. So I'm not going to labour over this one too much. The main point is one of the challenges we have in this space is there is a lot of things happening within council, because this is an important area that impacts in lots of ways, and there's lots of different work that we can do to support that. There's a list on the left. Some of those are things that you may have been involved in or may have heard of, some of them not. The key thing is that our one, and you may not be able to see this very well on your screen, but the work that we're doing is that kind of slightly orangey shaded box in that diagram. So we are focused on the community. So there's lots of work around infrastructure and building new things, changing the ways that people can build and where they can build. Our work is focused on how we support communities rather than those types of things. And we're in the long-term transformative space. So we know that that means that things can take a while, but we also know that's where we can have the biggest impact by focusing on the long-term and preparing for things over a longer period of time. And I'll hand over to Nadia.
Thanks, Ben. All right, Nadia, all yours.
Yep, kia ora koutou, ko Nadia de Blog tōku ingoa. My name's Nadia and I work in Ben's team in the social wellbeing policy on resilient Tamaki Makaurau. If you just flip to the next slide, Emily. So I was involved in this pilot, conceiving this pilot at the beginning. And I guess one of the main reasons that we have initiated the pilot is something Ben's already alluded to. We knew that disabled community would be potentially impacted more than most, more sensitive to some of the challenges that will arise, and that there's barriers to covering from those things as well for many. So we to be honest, we just didn't know what we didn't know. So we wanted to test and learn with the disabled community, and we really started this pilot with the idea that you are the experts who, with lived experience, who can identify fit for purpose solutions and ways to adapt more than we can. But we also knew that no one party can do this alone. Climate disruption is actually quite a big challenge, and it's going to be a long-term thing for us. So we will do best if we work together on it and join forces. So the idea about this pilot was twofold: that we could model a new way of working with the the disabled community and join forces, and that we could also learn and identify what works for you. So we really wanted to test two specific things. As I said, the new way of working, so that we could build much stronger relationships for the future. We haven't always got it right in the past. The only way that we can get better is by working together and learning from each other. And the second thing we would really love to do through this pilot is to test a participatory grant making model, and that's a way of doing grants that we hope will make it easier for you to access funding for your priorities and things that you decide on rather than us. Next slide. So in terms of just very briefly, the history of the pilot. So just flagging, like Anya said, this is definitely a learning approach. We really do want to listen, and we may not get it right 100% of the time, but we'd love to learn and constantly improve what we do. The learnings that we take from this pilot will help inform our regional approach over time. The pilot itself was designed by Activate Agency, which is a social Māori and disabled-led social impact agency. They had done some work for our Chief Sustainability Office on the intersection between disability and climate disruption in the past. So they did some research for us on what might best practice look like in a space like this. They used that to develop a proposal, which they then validated with key community stakeholders and with Auckland Council. We refined that proposal, and then we met, as we established the project team, we brought on two implementation partners, Liam, who has lived experience from within the community, and Sissy Rock, who has amazing facilitation experience. And we also established a grant advisory panel. We met with them, and they did tell us that there's they saw some opportunities to improve the proposal again. So there have been some tweaks to the original proposal, but I actually think that the project will be much stronger for it. So I will now pass over to the next speaker.
Liam speaking. Thanks, Nadia. Okay, so now we'll hear from Greg from Auckland Emergency Management. Over to you, Greg.
Kia ora koutou, ko Greg Morgan, toko ingoa. So my role is Principal Business and Partnerships at Auckland Emergency Management. And so already the speakers have kind of given the good hooks for me to hang my few words on. And I just want to talk about emergency management, particularly what we call readiness, and a little bit about response. So readiness is how we all get ready for an emergency, and response is the role that Auckland Emergency Management has with its partners to coordinate things that happen during an emergency time in a response. But we're not the only people who manage emergencies, of course. Everybody who's involved is really an emergency manager. And so we've all got to have a bit of an idea of what we will do when something unexpected happens. A key focus in my work is supporting sectors to build their readiness for emergencies. And that is for the unexpected that could happen. And also, of course, given climate realities, it means being ready for expected things too. And Anya spoke about some of those. This year, guided by inputs from multiple sources, Auckland Emergency Management has started working on a disability sector inclusion program. I'll just say that title again, Disability Sector Inclusion Program. And I acknowledge the Council's Disability Advisory Panel for its advice on our work. The aim of our program is to ensure that we, as people employed in emergency management, and our partner agencies and the community organisations we work with, plan for and respond to emergencies in ways that are inclusive of and accessible to people with disabilities. We want to be consistent in making use of disabled people's experiences, perspectives, life skills, and expertise. To get us there, Auckland Emergency Management will be undertaking co-design work around priorities identified by people with disabilities. And the priorities, of course, will be in emergency readiness and also in some of the processes that are used during emergency responses. Co-design with disability sector organisations and especially disability-led groups is essential for us to change the way disabled people can know that they are being thought about in planning for emergencies and when an emergency occurs. Their priorities are likely to include readiness messages and being prepared, having to cope at home during an emergency, and what to think about if you decide to leave or have to leave your home to go somewhere else to be safe. There's an obvious overlap between disaster resilience, emergency readiness, and so on, and climate resilience. And so our program and the Disability-Led Climate Initiative will work out in the background which team can best support an idea and provide information, advice, or support. And so I want to say this to you. For participants in your climate work, figuring out which council team does what shouldn't be a barrier. We will work in the background to address that. You have the ideas. We will figure out who can give the best advice and who can assist. And, Auckland Emergency Management and we're always available to help answer questions or to join up the dots. Thanks very much.
Liam speaking. Kia ora. Thanks, Greg. Okay, so now I will pass over to Jana and Connie from Foundation North, just to give a little bit of an insight into the participatory grant making process.
Kia ora, thanks Liam. Kia ora tātou, ko Connie Lee Aho. I am the Strategic Projects Advisor at Foundation North. And alongside Jana, we lead out on a range of participatory grant making models. And I just want to take the time to thank Liam, Debs, and the panel tonight for making this webinar happen and all the speakers who's presented. It's I'm learning a lot. Just before we kick in, I'll be co-presenting with Jana, and I'll just hand it over to Jan to introduce herself.
Kia ora, Connie. Kia ora tātou. He uri ahau no Te Arawa me Ngāpuhi. E mahi ana ahau ki Foundation North hei Project Coordinator, ko Jana Wilson tōku ingoa. Kia ora, Connie.
Thanks, Emily. Next slide, please. Great. So we've heard a lot about the strategy and the research and the rationale behind this disability-led climate adaptation pilot. So Jan and I are here to share a little bit about the how and the process and what we've learned. So we've learned that through, and we also, I'll just say I'm going to shorten participatory grant making to just PGM. So PGM is a funding model and an approach that shares decision-making powers with the people and the community that is and will be directly impacted by the grant. So instead of having funders decide alone, those communities who set the priorities, selection and evaluation, it's done in partnership. And the beauty of PGM models is that there's no magic formula, there's no one size fits all. But what we do know is that it looks very different from a traditional funding model where it's quite funding or funders centric. This way it requires everyone to be a bit creative and to commit to trying something new and stretching and learning collectively. Next slide, please.
Kia ora, Jana speaking. So why does this approach work? So this is only a couple of highlights to why this approach works. Community voice and equity. So engaging with people with lived experience who offer practical insights into to what actually will achieve the solutions, and shifting the power back to those people, which often lessens the bias, which I know was mentioned a little bit before from Anya about the decision making. So this approach, that's why this approach does work. Trust and transparency. So open collaborative process, which builds accountability to communities and stronger relationships within those communities. Improving outcomes and future-proofing. So community solutions grounded in their experience and their need is actually more relevant, and then increasing long-term impact. Capacity and capability. So this is part of the panel's leadership and decision making as well, creates their relationships and strengthens their community's ecosystem, having been a participant of these projects. And then innovation and evolving. So this is our learning as decision makers and funders to commit to continuous learning around unique community need, and then be agile and adapt to those needs, and then adapt our practices that respond. And like Connie says, it's not a one size fits all. So we need to learn to be adaptable as well. Next slide, please.
Kia ora. This is Connie speaking. And I guess what can be achieved. So whilst PGM is a funding model, we know that there's a lot of things that also come out of adopting a model like this. There's an increase in leadership opportunity, an opportunity for community to be really involved and community centric, so their voices are heard. Advocacy, so it's I think what we were saying before, the advocacy is not just you now advocating for your community, but you've also got allies that are advocating with you for any issues that arise. And we know that the process is just as important as the outcome. So great, there's funding alongside it, that the process is just as important. And it's an iterative process, so it's there's no need to think that we need to design the perfect system all in one go. It's very much reflecting every round, what worked, what didn't, what can be tweaked, or even just being brave and giving something a go. The what ifs, the dreaming, this is the place to do it. So yeah, the funders, I guess the funders who are in there, they believe in you, so remaining flexible on the how and acknowledging that each funder may have limitations and being very clear with what parameters there are, but also to the community, don't be afraid to test some of those parameters, because that's the way that we learn. We can learn by you guys, what is not working, what is working. So yeah, I'm really pleased that this pilot is going ahead, and we're very pleased to be part of it. Kia ora. Thanks, Liam.
Kia ora. Thanks, Connie and Jana. Okay, so now we have a scheduled mini break for 5 minutes, and that's a time for you all to formulate some questions and submit them into our Q&A function. So we'll kind of give you 5 minutes to do that, and then we'll come back and cover off any questions that we've received. Thank you.
Liam, I wonder if while people are thinking about any questions that they might have, if I just share one of the questions that we often get as part of the project team.
Yes.
And people may want, I'm mindful people may want to go away and think about this and then come back to us later with questions, which is fine. But one of the things people often ask us is, what are some really tangible examples of the sorts of things that might be funded through the PGM and the grant program? And I guess we've started to kind of compile some possible ideas, and so just to give you a sense of what they are, and it's by no means a comprehensive list, but just some sort of initial thoughts. We're very mindful that there's a lot of information and a lot of learning resources out there for communities about climate adaptation, and the wider issues related to climate disruption. And we are aware that a lot of those resources are not particularly disability friendly or accessible. And so one of the things that we could fund would be for disability organisations or other providers to work with those organisations that have developed these resources to help make them much more accessible and for disabled communities. Another example would be we recognise that we probably need some initiatives that are both disability specific, but also where we can support people with disabilities to be more engaged in broader kind of policy processes, to have some influence and input into that planning, so that the needs and preferences and strengths of people with disabilities are much more visible and evident in wider climate policies and strategies and plans. So that's just a couple of things that we've thought of that we think could have some potential, and of course we're always keen to hear more ideas, and we do have a process coming up that people can participate in. But I'm not sure that we've got any questions in the Q&A at the moment.
No, can't
Maybe
see any
not.
questions at this point. No.
Oh well. I wonder if we should just move on to the next slide, and then perhaps if people do have some questions, we can jump across to that.
Well, yep, at the end. Yep, that sounds good.
Does that sound all right, Liam?
Yep, definitely.
Okay, so I think, as I said, tonight's just been a little bit of an introduction and a sort of taste of some of the key themes around climate adaptation and disability. And so hopefully there's been some good learning and good insights in there. We want to really stay connected with the wider disability community. I just picking up on some of Nadia's comments about it being a pilot, and also Connie and Jana's, this is very much about learning, and so we want to try things, and we want to reflect and adapt and evolve as we go, and not just with this pilot, but also making sure that what we learn is able to influence the wider program. So we do really want to encourage people to stay connected and to participate. We will be sharing.
Debbie, it's Paul here. Sorry to interrupt. I'm being told by a couple of people who've messaged me that they can't see a Q&A function.
Yeah, I've had that too. I've had somebody
so
post.
Apparently it's not working. That's why you're not getting any questions.
That would explain it. Maybe could we try the chat function, or Emily, is that something that you could perhaps have a look at?
So one of our attendees, Nicola, has actually emailed me with her question, and I've just posted that on her behalf in the chat, in the Q&A. Sorry, Deb.
Okay, great. Oh, look, thank you, Liam, and thank you, Nicola. So the question, I'll read out the question so that everyone knows what it is. What kind of groups can apply for funding, and how quickly do applications need to be submitted and projects completed? Can national organisations with local branches in Auckland apply? So this will my answer to this will explain what the next steps are. So what we're planning to do is to run a series of focus groups that will be co-hosted with disability organisations in Auckland. And those focus groups, the purpose of those focus groups will be to develop and prioritise funding proposals. So that's where we'll be able to work up some ideas for potential initiatives, look at who might be interested in putting a proposal together and being part of a delivery partnership, and we'll go from there. So that's very much part of the PGM model. We'll also be running some online ones as well so that people can participate in that. But we will get back to all of you about those opportunities to participate. So that's the first thing. So what we wanted to do was really support the community as much as we could to develop the ideas and the proposals. At the same time, the grant advisory panel will be designing the process, the grant funding process, including the criteria. So we will, by the time we are running those focus groups at the end of October and November, we will have some very clear parameters based on the advice from the panel about what can be funded and the process for accessing that funding. So Nicola, I know that was kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but I think as long as the groups are, they're disability-led and they are, they have an Auckland presence, that would be fine. And we would certainly encourage and look at where we can support disability groups, perhaps to work with groups that have a focus on climate adaptation and some of those sorts of opportunities. So hopefully that has answered that question. The other bit of the process I should mention, and it's noted in the slide there, is that once we've had those focus groups co-hosted with the disability organisations, and we've got a set of potential ideas for initiatives worked up, then we will host a specific workshop for each one of those years to really work it up into a proposal. So this is how it's kind of different from a normal kind of funding process where you might just put out an expression of interest, people go away, they write up a submission and put it in. This is a much more engaging, working closely together, supportive kind of approach. So that's the approach we're going to be taking. Hopefully I won't be able to hear you, but hopefully that's answered your question. And I see there's a question from Nadia as well, and I'll read that out. Would you also be able to clarify how Auckland Council, the implementation partners and the grant advisory panel will work together? What are their respective roles? So I might have just answered that a little bit already, Nadia, just talking about the role of the grant advisory panel in designing the funding process and the criteria. In terms of how we work together, we work closely with the panel and also with the implementation partners. We have a project meeting with Auckland Council and the implementation partners once a week, so we're very connected. We tend to do the kind of behind the scenes stuff, and Liam and Sissy tend to do the community facing part of it. So that's how we kind of work together. And the grant advisory panel, we meet with them once a fortnight just to make sure they're up to speed with what we're doing, and also to provide advice with us at every step of the way, really. So that's generally how we work together. But again, I would say that it's all very kind of evolving, and as you mentioned before, Nadia, we've already changed the way we do things a little bit based on the feedback from the grant advisory panel. I think there might be
a couple of more questions. Yeah.
Okay. Hang on. Here's one. The next question, my company was contracted to design a process for people in wheelchairs in an event of a civil emergency. This was never implemented. How can we be sure that this project will be used to benefit disabled people? Well, thank you for the question. I think the main way that we can assure that is by working closely with the disability community. And I think the role of the grant advisory panel and also our engagement with the community through the focus groups and the targeted workshops and working very closely to develop those proposals, and we'll be looking at ways to support implementation as well. I think that's the best way to guarantee that the project will benefit disabled people. That's certainly one of the intentions. And another question here, what are the plans after the pilot? That's a very good question. I think there will be an implementation phase, so that those who've been successful with the grants we're hoping that that implementation will start in the first quarter of next year. And we have an evaluation component to this pilot. Obviously, it's a pilot. It's important to learn and collect our kind of data and insights about what's working. So there will be a point at which recommendations are made back to council with the input from the panel and the implementation partners about what the next steps might be. So we can't really say at this stage, but that will all depend on the findings of the evaluation and the feedback that we get along the way. So the answer really is we don't really know what the plans are for the pilot, but we would certainly want to ensure that anything that was funded would be sustainable and enduring as much as we could. So the next question, do you have any resources about this we can share with our community? Yeah, great question, thank you. We have a little 2 or 3 page summary of the pilot called the DLCAP lowdown, and that provides a bit of a mouthful, but that provides a bit of an overview of the pilot, what it's about, and contact details as well. So we can, if you haven't seen that already, we're very happy to share that with everybody that's dialed into this webinar.
Yep.
And I'm just going to, I just wanted to make sure that I covered the key points on that last slide there in terms of next steps. So just in terms of the timeline, we are looking at the focus groups at the end of October and into the beginning of November. And we will be, as I said, we will be keeping you informed about those and your opportunities to participate. And then we'll follow up with those targeted workshops to really develop the proposals and the delivery partnerships in November, with a view to making recommendations through to council about what is funded in December this year. So all going well, if we're able to stick to that timeline, which we certainly intend to, we'll be allocating the funding in February, March next year, with implementation to start after that. So that's the timeline that we're working to at the moment. We've noted on the slide too a contact email address. This is the email address for one of our implementation partners at Community Think. So I'll just read it out for you. The email address is projects@communitythink.nz. So I think that's all the questions that we had, and I think I've covered the key points I needed to cover. So can I hand back to you now, Liam? Just one last thing, I would just really encourage you all, if you do have any more questions or thoughts or ideas after this webinar, please sing out and let us know. We'll be very happy to hear from you. And thank you all so much for attending.
Liam speaking. Cool. Thank you, Deb. Okay, so that brings us kind of to the end of our, I guess, formalities for the webinar or for this session. And like Deb said, I think it's important that we all keep connected after this and just fire through any questions that you have, after tonight. So what I will do is just hand it over to one of our other panel members, Leslie, to close us off with a karakia. Thanks, Leslie. Is Leslie here? Leslie, are you there?
Would you like me to do a karakia?
Yes, please.
I don't know this one. Is it okay if I do another one?
Yep. Yep.
Also. Kia ora. E tatua. Ke tau ki a tātou katoa. Te ata whai o tō tātou. Ariki e he karaiti. Me tō aroha i te atua. Me te whiwhinātaitanga. Ki te wairoa tape. Aki aki ake. Āmeni.
Kia ora. Thanks, Tamara. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining tonight, and we'll let you get back to your evening.